Fall of the Soviet Union. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 and the rise of Boris Yeltsin, the former mayor of Moscow, to the office of president of Russia, was a time of celebration for many. The old Soviet leaders were now out, but their economy was in shambles, their military was weak, birth rate was in decline, their people were migrating, their pride shattered. So going on to the more advanced reasons, the more important events of the Cold War, in my opinion. First was the Yalta Conference. The Yalta Conference, for all intents and purposes, prevented World War III from occurring between the Soviet Union and the British Empire. As initially stated in the beginning of the video, Stalin needed a geopolitical boundary to protect the Soviet Union, especially after what the Russians went through during the Great Patriotic War. Plus, there was also a suspicion of the British that the Soviets would attack first, so Operation Unthinkable was created to counter that. So luckily, neither of those happened. Next is the US bombing of the Japanese. Now, this, of course, they started the nuclear age. But if the nukes, say, weren't dropped, and the US or the nuclear bombs were just never created for that matter, as initially stated, again, Operation Downfall would have commenced, and according to the Department of Defense, 7 million more lives would be lost, 2 million American, 5 million Japanese, and those were just completely unacceptable numbers to Harry S. Truman and, of course, historians today. And that is why, we bombed Japan. The Soviet atomic bombing, this just started the nuclear arms race between the Americans and the Soviets. This ended any sort of relationship of friendship between the two powers, since they are now at each other's throats, at odds, and now they had the capacity to not only destroy the world, but very much destroy each other. Now, the rise of China. This is going to be added on to another point with Nixon visiting China, and the modern implications of the Chinese state nowadays. But China has always been a very important power in world history, and this is no different if the Kuomintang won or the communist one. Biggest difference is you had a bunch of Chinese who died during the industrializations and the cultural revolutions of the 1960s and the 1950s. And of course, that'd be more people to add on to China's, pool of population and for innovation. But from what the Chinese did and what they're doing today, it's world history would have been changed quite a bit having a Chinese ally to the United States, but that's not what happened. Fall of the Berlin Wall. So this is important because this assured reunification would happen. If the Berlin Wall didn't fall, reunification would not have happened. And this was a long time coming to begin with. The East Germans were in debt. They didn't know what they're doing with their country. And the West Germans were competent. They had a growing country. Germany was going to be reunified at some point. It just all depended on when the wall was going to fall. The fall of the Soviet Union. Possibly the defining image of the 20th century is the red banner of the Soviet Union being lowered for the last time over the Kremlin. The Soviet Union, now Russia, had lost the Cold War and their former communist empire. Throughout the 90s, Russia was gripped with economic collapse, protests, and terrorism, and near civil war in 1993. Plus, there were the Chechen wars being fought throughout the decade. This defined the Russian struggle throughout the 90s, and at the turn of the 21st century, a new leader came to power, Vladimir Putin. The past 20 years till today have been marked with struggle, rebuilding, and patience for the Russian Federation. In 2014, they invaded Ukraine, took control of Crimea with subpar results, and are now intervening in Syria to help Assad in a civil war against the liberals and Islamists. In the beginning, many Russians looked at the fall of the Soviet Union to be a new relationship with the West and start of freedom, while many others longed for the return of their once mighty empire. Today, their birth rate issues are trying to be reversed, their economy rebuilt and diversify, and their military become more capable to face head-on-head combat with the West. No one knows what the Russians have in plan for the world. Nixon visiting China. I don't need to make this long, but this is what started the modern trade agreements between the United States and China today. From the 1940s to the 1970s, Japan was the East Asian economic powerhouse until the 90s, and they had their recession and they haven't recovered since. China took that place. If we never opened up relationship with China, that would not have happened. And because of the massive debt we have gotten with China in these past 30, 40 years, this has allowed them to build up their country and start expanding to Africa, the Middle East, South America, Europe, and so on. And this really is allowing the Chinese to become the new superpower in the world, perhaps. Apollo 11, something non-political. The first time man got out of this planet, landed on the moon. A very celebrated event in the history of mankind, and something I very much admire today. This had a lot of implications on aviation technology, space technology, what we think of ourselves as humanity. It almost failed, and there was a lot of money and man labor, hours put into this. This gave a lot of Americans jobs, and this made us very prideful in our country and our people after landing on a moon and winning the space race. Now that is my Cold War project. Thank you very, very much for sitting through this. I appreciate this a lot more than PowerPoint. I hope you appreciate it. Thank you.